guys, I'm professional race fan and occasional race car driver Tom O'Gorman, and we're at the Roar Before the 24 at Daytona, and no one gave me car keys, so I'm hanging against the fence. We're going to talk about how to be a better spectator and how being a spectator can make you a better driver. So I grew up playing video games, and I didn't have a lot of reference for how to be a good driver, but I used to watch my replays endlessly, and that kind of taught me how watching a car can make me a better driver. So I love standing up against the fence at a racetrack, especially one that I've never been to before, and picking reference points off of what the pros are doing to see how, when I get out there, I can actually drive better. So we're standing basically right at the break point for the International Horseshoe here at Daytona. We're watching the Michelin Pilot Challenge cars come through, and what I love to do is pick the drivers that are pushing the braking point the hardest first, and then I look down to the corner and see who's actually making the corner. So if they're braking here or braking later and they're not making the corner, I'm not going to learn off that guy. But take this Aston, for example. Looks like he overslowed that quite a bit, so I'm going to pick a different car, and then I can kind of figure out what my reference point might be as a driver when I'm watching these pros go around. A lot of Pro Series cars also have a number panel on the side of the car that shows you the position now, so it's kind of hard to figure out who's fast and who's slow just from watching, especially if you're a newer driver, if you don't have experience driving on track. There's an LA Honda World Civic Type R. It said number 2 on the side, which means it's the second fastest car on track. That lets me know that that's probably a good car to watch if I want to pick up reference points, if I want to watch a fast driver versus, let's say, the Audi here in 20th. So we're watching the Michelin Pilot Challenge, and the cool thing about most road racing is you get multi-class in even amateur and professional. So right out here we're watching GS and TCR cars, and kind of talked about reference points. You can watch and see the difference in braking points, in turning points, in cornering speed visually off of the TCR cars versus the GS cars, using them as an example. You can see that a lot of the TCR cars, they brake later and they're faster through the middle of the corner than half the GT4 cars, or even more than that. And that introduces this layer of racing when they get to the actual race. If you're good at working traffic, if you're good at predicting what the cars around you are going to do, you can make so much more time on people by getting faster through traffic. So another thing I love watching for as a spectator is the driving styles of different cars. So there's a Porsche Cayman going behind me here. Notice the brake lights were on well past turn-in, almost down to the apex. And those mid-engine, rear-engine cars, they brake longer and longer and longer into the corner. It's more trail braking to keep the nose down, keep the car turning. And let's see if we can catch a front-wheel drive car here coming in a minute. So now we got a TCR car coming up here, this Honda at the end of the line. You're gonna watch him basically at the turn-in point. He's off the brakes, and that's to get that front-wheel drive car rotating into the corner and get it down to the apex with momentum, and then he can straighten his hands up sooner and accelerate off the corner. Completely different driving style, and you can watch from the outside, see brake lights. You can see when they're coming on and off the inputs of these different cars. I love watching for those differences and seeing, okay, if I got in that car, what do I got to do to make it go fast? As a driver with multi-class racing, it can be the biggest gift in the entire world, and it can be the most frustrating thing in the entire world. And it really depends on your mentality, how calm you are in the car, and how good you get at looking through other people's windshields, reading traffic around you. If you're behind the ball all the time, it's going to be super frustrating. But if you can kind of learn to predict the body language of the cars around you, and you can learn to predict, especially as you race in the same series, you can predict what certain drivers are going to do. And you can use that to your advantage in a way that gets you ahead of your competition so much more efficiently than just driving faster than your competition. So in the Michelin Pilot Challenge and in really most of the IMSA series, they always implement what they call a class split. And that means that no matter how fast you are or slow you are, the GS cars always go in front of the TCR cars at the start of the race and under any full course caution. And as a driver, that is extremely frustrating, because we've already talked about the TCR cars. A lot of times they're faster than maybe half or more of the GS cars. You've done all this work to get in front of these cars that are fundamentally faster than you, but being driven slower than you, and then caution comes out and you're immediately back to where you started. So you can only put so much effort into passing these cars that are faster than you as a slower car. And as the faster car, you're frustrated all the time with these guys who want to get around you. So it's really, like I said, being calm in the car and learning to read the body language of the cars around you, understanding that you're not really racing them, but you can use them as a pick, you can use them to gain advantage, and not overdoing it and putting yourself in a dangerous position. So within the IMSA series, all of the series have different driver rankings required for the series. So this series will only allow so many professional drivers relative to the number of amateur drivers based on driver ranking. So the standard format is the gentleman driver, the amateur driver, the lower ranked driver, however you want to call them. they typically will start the race, and that means they also qualify the cars. So if you're watching this race on TV or live, and it's the first half of the race, it's probably that lesser experienced, kind of gentleman or more amateur ranked driver. Then at the end of the race, it's typically the pro driver that gets in, and the best pairings are the drivers with the least deficit between the two of them. So as a driver in the car, I tend to understand whether it's the beginning or the end of the race, who's probably in that car at the given time. They always tell you on the timesheet, so you can also pull up the live timing at any point on the series website when you're watching and see who's in the car. But in general, at the beginning of the race, the slower driver is in, and towards the end of the race, the faster driver is in. And from the seat, that means I trust different drivers in a different way. The best time to change drivers is during the pit stop. So if there's a pit stop right in the middle of the race, that middle kind of 30 minutes of the race, you can almost guarantee that all the amateur drivers are going to hop out and all the pros are going to hop in. And that means that there's really no guessing as to who's still left over in the car until you get to the much longer races, maybe the bigger series where they race for 12, 24 hours at a time. As a fan, it's really easy to come in and you see one race, or you don't necessarily see the races happening regularly unless you're really religious about following. But as a driver, the reality is we're seeing the exact same drivers in the exact same cars for 10, 11 weeks at a time in these series. And with that comes kind of learning the personalities of the drivers. There are certain drivers that you can learn to trust. There are certain drivers that you know to just absolutely stay away from. Don't, you say leave them a car width in an inch, you leave them a corner in an inch. Just let them go, because a lot of these, especially endurance races, are about minimizing incidents and minimizing risk. So when you're watching as a fan, if you're watching really, really close, tight racing, those guys probably know each other. They've probably been racing together for a while, and they trust each other a lot. If you're seeing what looks like maybe hero behavior, that means they probably know something about each other, and they're just gonna let the other guy go. Let him get away with that hero move, because it's just not worth the risk at that time. So as a fan, there are certain factors that if you understand, you can really start to appreciate kind of more of what's going on underneath the top layer based on what kind of race it is. So we use this weekend at the Roar as an example. All these people are preparing for either a 24-hour long race or a 4-hour race, and that's a big difference. And we'll lump in just a standard sprint race to talk about the differences. So the biggest thing is how long the race is. With a sprint race, you don't have to worry about the car braking nearly as much. You don't have to worry about burning the tires off, fueling, pit stops, all those things. It's pretty much balls to the wall all the time. 4-hour race with these Michelin Pilot cars, there's a little bit more of that. There's 2 drivers now, and really the first driver's job is just to get the second driver in the car. That's it. Even if he's dead last, that guy can still come back after 2 more hours and get the win. And then you have a 24-hour race. There's usually 3, 4, even 5 drivers, 3 classes on track. There's so much more going on. That's a lot more about just kind of saving the car and getting yourself to the next driver, to the next driver, to the next driver with a minimal amount of downtime and mistakes. So understanding that is the first thing, and then also understanding how the cars make speed relative to one another is a big thing with racing. So if you're watching a sprint race of all one car, all one make, you're going to see them positioning themselves to maybe draft on the last lap. You're going to see a lot of jockeying for position, but you may not see like all-out racing the entire time. If you're watching a longer race with lots of different kinds of cars that make speed in different ways, you're going to see a lot of action at the beginning. You're going to see certain cars that like to lead, certain cars that like to follow, and you can really start to understand the nuance between the cars when you add in multiple drivers and how long the race is. You can appreciate all of the different layers that are going on. It's not just cars going by. So I hope that helps you appreciate spectating a little more, make racing a little more fun to watch, and maybe make you a better driver along the way. Hopefully also you see me in one of these cars sometime soon. Again, I'm Tom O'Gorman. You can follow me on Instagram, on Facebook. I'm everywhere, and always in these dopey blue glasses. So we'll see you at the next one.